Thank you for joining us yet again on our news desk on QTV. The headlines. Finance Minister Bwalya Ngandu says government owes a total of 4.7 billion kwacha in VAT refunds as at 30th June 2019. President Edgar Lungu has urged ministers to pull up their socks and explain the negative effects of climate change and what government is doing to mitigate it. Lusaka lawyer Kelvin Bwalya has challenged the church to show leadership and rebuke those he says are leading the country's downfall. Here now is the news in detail. Finance Minister Bwalya Ngandu says government owes a total of 4.7 billion kwacha in VAT refunds as of 30th June 2019. Responding to a question by Mufulira Member of Parliament Evans Chibanda, who wanted to know how much money in value-added tax refunds was owed to mining companies, Dr. Ngandu says the 4.7 billion kwacha is owed to mining companies, manufacturing companies, other business entities and individuals. He says 5 mining companies, namely Lumwana, KCM, Kansanshi, Mopani and Kalumbila are owed 2.8 billion kwacha in VAT refunds. Dr. Ngandu says government is doing everything possible to deal with the arrears by engaging the entities involved, particularly those that are owed outstanding amounts, to come to an agreement regarding the schedule of payment.
And going forward, as we work out the modality of extinguishing all the loans, we are looking at the VAT refund, we are looking at the TBs, the bonds, the arrears, as part of this quantum of debt, which needs a comprehensive approach to it. So we will look at all the debt and comprehensively try to deal with the debt. I understand that it's fairly large quantum you're talking about when you put it together, but the strategy is to deal with the debt, not as small components, but as a comprehensive approach, so that at the end of it, we have dealt with the problem more comprehensively and to the satisfaction of the subscribers, especially the subscribers to the bonds and TBs. Because as I said before, you have to meet the maturities as they fall due, and as you know, if government doesn't meet the maturities, if government doesn't respond when they fall due, then that constitutes a default, and government doesn't want to default, because if government defaults, then you create a problem of trust in those instruments, because they're issued on the basis that the government is the sovereign, and the sovereign will always stay, to not go away, to not run away. So it is important to understand that the sovereign will not default, and that is the primary consideration at each and every point when we're dealing with these instruments.
President Edgar Lungu has implored ministries to take the presidential quarterly cluster reporting very seriously, as the initiative is aimed at ensuring coherence in the communication of government programs. Speaking when the Ministries of National Development, Planning and Finance presented their reports, President Lungu says the initiative is not a formality as people would think. Thus, the need for ministries to do their best so that the people of Zambia know how they are performing. And the head of state has bemoaned the manner in which people are responding to the 2020 national budget and the State of the Nation address with regards to the climate change issues. President Lungu is concerned how people are pretending not to see what is happening globally, even in the neighboring countries. He has since urged ministries to pull up their socks and explain the negative effects of climate change and what government is doing to mitigate it. President Lungu says there is need to ensure that the correct information reaches the people in order for them to understand what is happening.
We can be able to tell that, sorry, we will not achieve these set goals and give us the reason so that we're able to explain to our people. Because it's not business as usual. I've seen how people have responded to the budget in Parliament and outside. I've seen how people have responded to my speech at the State of the Nation address. Things are happening in Zimbabwe, things are happening in Malawi, things are happening in Mozambique, but people want to pretend that we are an island and we're not affected by the global economy. I think we need to pull up our socks and just explain where we are. So those remarks, I'm sure those who come after you will take it serious, that this is not a ritual, it's not a ceremony, it is business, and we mean to know exactly what's going on and what is affecting us. So with those remarks, I will allow the Minister of Finance to present on the macroeconomic performance.
And making a presentation before the head of state, Finance Minister Bwalya Ngandu says total revenue grants collections from January to August stands at 42.8 billion kwacha, which is 9% higher than the target of 39.3 billion kwacha. Dr. Ngandu says tax revenue stands at 33.6 billion kwacha compared to the target of 32.1 billion kwacha.
So the external interest rate payments were particularly above target by 52.6%, largely due to the exchange rate shifting, because every time there is an adverse movement in the exchange rate, the kwacha requirements increase, but also there was an increase in the actual amounts due to the loans basically increasing as we disperse. The disbursement added more to the stock of the loan, and that increased the interest rate payment. But the exchange rate was a major factor here. Now, other expenditure items such as PEs, the use of goods and services, and the transfers and other payments were below target by 15.8, 5.3, and 4.2. Now, I need to add here that this is not necessarily a good thing, because what this represents is that we are simply not able to meet. So,
the Policy Monitoring and Research Center, PMRC, has warned that macroeconomic targets set out in the 2020 national budget will not be achieved if the country's current power deficit is not resolved. PMRC Head of Monitoring and Evaluation, Akawondo Kabechani, notes that if the power deficit continues into 2020, it will impact on budget implementation. Mr. Kabechani says the PMRC is therefore recommending that government focuses on spending on key sectors of the economy in order to ensure successful implementation of the budget. He has submitted before the Parliamentary Expanded Budget Committee on the 2020 national budget that this is what will also guarantee inclusive growth. More in this report.
Policy Monitoring and Research Center, PMRC, is warning the targets set out in the 2020 national budget may not be met with the current power deficit. The think tank is basing its argument on the fact that all sectors of the economy rely on power. Before this Parliamentary Expanded Budget Committee, PMRC Head of Monitoring and Evaluation, Akawondo Kabechani, has however submitted a few solutions to government.
The budget direction should focus on, I think, measures in the power sector which should establish a central planning function, most obviously the Ministry of Energy, to develop a strategic vision and delivery plan for increasing and diversifying capacity in the power sector. We also would like to see measures to improve the creditworthiness of ZESCO as a sole off-taker.
The PMRC has also suggested the need for government to explore opportunities that aquaculture poses for food security and generation of income.
So there's urgent need to stimulate activity in this sector, especially considering that we have been advocating for enhancement of the blue economy, which includes fisheries subsector. Government, of course, established the Fisheries Development Fund to stimulate growth in this sector, but there has been inadequate information to ascertain the effectiveness of the fund and how much has been realized so far.
On trade and commerce, the think tank is urging government to build capacity of Zambian firms as the country ratifies the African Continental Free Trade Area.
Government must also prioritize sectors where we have a comparative advantage and build domestic production capacity. And good examples of this are in agro-processing and mining.
It was also the submission of the PMRC that given the current austerity measures, half of the 10.5 billion allocated to road infrastructure in the 2020 national budget be reallocated to social sectors. Lazarus Sichula, QTV News. Policy.
Action Aid Zambia Country Director Nalucha Ziva has expressed concern that the measures put in place to raise funds for the 2020 national budget might pose a great challenge. Mrs. Ziva has cited the raising of funds through taxing the informal sector as one of such measures that might be a challenge. She says this is considering that in the past, efforts to come up with a system on how to tax the informal sector have proved challenging. Mrs. Ziva has further questioned how government is going to raise the funds for a budget that has increased by 23% when it failed to raise the funds for the 86 billion kwacha 2019 national budget. She, however, states that she looks forward to see how government will go about the process of taxing the informal sector.
Then also our other concern is in terms of the actual raising of the funds for the budget. We failed to raise for the 86 billion with the current 23% budget increment. Where would the actual funds come from? And looking at the cost of debt that we are, the amount of funds that we are allocating towards debt servicing, which itself is necessary in the long term to bring about stability in our economy. But however, we are of the view that some of the measures which have been put through in terms of raising funds for the 2020 budget might pose to be a challenge. One of them is taxing the informal sector. We know that there has been talks over the years of taxing the informal sector in terms of coming up with a system which actually taxes the informal sector. This is where we have seen, we have experienced challenges as a country. So we are looking forward to seeing how government intends to go about this, because what we have seen over the years is that once they fail to tax the informal sector, then we tend to see introduction of so many taxes along the way in the middle of the year, which again gets to affect the already 20% who are being captured through the formal tax system.
Lusaka lawyer Kelvin Waliafube has challenged the church to show leadership and denounce and rebuke those he says are leading to the country's downfall. Addressing a media briefing, Mr. Fube says the church should put the people of Zambia first. He says the church should not worry that politicians will stop giving them contributions and tithing if they speak against them. And Mr. Fube has urged Zambians to reject politicians who have no clear roadmap and vision for the country. He says most of the country problems are as a result of failed leadership because people allow politicians to hoodwink them.
You know that the nation is hurting, under financial stress, polarized, and searching for hope and direction. You know that our people detest violence, detest tribalism, detest corruption, injustice, and harassment from cadres. You know that as a church. My appeal is that those selfish politics often want to divide us and pit us against one another. You, men and women of the cloth, are our last line of defense. Please inspire and guide this nation towards peace, unity, and preach against the perpetration of tribalism and political violence like we've just witnessed in Kaoma. Raise a standard against corruption and refuse to compromise. Vulnerable Zambians are looking to you to defend them from the injustice of the powerful in society. Zambians are expecting you to speak on their behalf when politicians take destructive paths.
And Mr. Fube has advised the Energy Regulation Board to demand for ZESCO's audited accounts for the last 3 months before it can entertain any application for tariff hikes. He has wondered how the power utility has suddenly become broke despite collecting revenue through electricity bills. Mr. Fube has questioned why ZESCO is failing to import power so that load shedding can be reduced to allow the small-medium enterprises to conduct their businesses normally.
I don't know why it hasn't been done. We are suffering load shedding today because somehow, somewhere, someone wants to protect ZESCO, which is technically insolvent. ZESCO is broke. Let me ask you a few questions, if that's not a fact. One, has ZESCO in the recent past produced audited accounts worth its position? In business, certainty is important because it allows for planning while defeating risky short-term management. It is clear that ZESCO cannot borrow because its financial standing is not healthy. Banks lend to businesses running viable operations or those with collateral. If ZESCO's audited accounts in the last 3 years were healthy, ZESCO would have borrowed from any bank. Instead, our ERB is busy granting hikes to ZESCO for tariffs, punishing the Zambians. Let me tell ERB this. Before you grant the next hike in electricity hike tariffs against the Zambians, ask ZESCO to produce audited accounts for the last 3 years.
Minister of Lands and Natural Resources, Jean Kapata, says the subcommittee of the Central Joint Operations on Mukula has facilitated the inspection and escort of 455 trucks laden with Mukula logs in transit through Zambia from the Democratic Republic of Congo. In a ministerial statement to Parliament on the clearance of the trucks laden with Mukula logs in transit from the DRC, Ms. Kapata says out of the 455 trucks that have been paid for, 361 trucks have transited through Zambia, while 3 trucks have not exited the country due to various reasons. She adds that 91 trucks are still on the DRC side of the border awaiting clearance. Ms. Kapata has revealed that a total of 1,187,400 kwacha has so far been collected from the inspection of the 455 trucks. She adds that the DRC government has also paid 915,200 kwacha to meet the cost of escorting the trucks.
Madam Speaker, there are challenges being encountered during the implementation of this exercise. I must mention that the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo has not been able to implement the exercise as projected by the Zambian government. The agreed plan was to have a minimum of 60 trucks transiting per day. However, at the beginning of the exercise, the average number that were transiting was 20 trucks per consignment. The number only increased to 40 trucks per consignment upon inclusion of Nakonde border as a port of exit to those of Chirundu, Kazungula, Katima, and Katimamulilo.
United Nations Resident Coordinator Kumba Ma Gadio has urged the government to raise taxes on health-harming products in a bid to curtail the non-communicable diseases, NCDs. Speaking in Lusaka during the dissemination of the investment case on non-communicable diseases, Dr. Kadio has also noted the need to work with the private sector on reformulating food and drinks. She says there is need for everyone to step up their efforts in supporting government to enforce policies and legislation when it comes to tobacco control, tackling the harmful use of alcohol and promoting physical activity and healthy diets. Dr. Gadio has since held Zambia's strategy on prevention and control of the non-communicable diseases.
A multi-sectoral approach is needed to reduce the impact of NCDs. Exposure to NCDs risk factors is often rooted in public policies that span beyond the health sector and include sectors such as finance, agriculture, education, and urban planning. One of the recommendations of the 2017 programming mission of the UN NCD Task Force was that an NCD investment case be conducted. During 2018 and 2019, UNDP and WHO have worked with the government to undertake this analysis. It is these results that will be presented to you today.
Speaking at the same event, Health Minister Chitalu Chilufya, who was represented by Health Permanent Secretary for Technical Services, Kennedy Malama, says government will ensure that health systems respond more effectively to the health needs of the people by influencing policies in sectors outside health that could address the major risk factors such as tobacco use, physical inactivity, and alcohol abuse. Dr. Chilufya adds that the results of the non-communicable diseases investment case will to a large and a greater extent enrich the content of the multi-sectoral NDC's strategic plan.
The most affected age group when it comes to morbidity and mortality with non-communicable diseases is the 30 to 69-year-olds. But that should not sway you. We are seeing also an increase in some non-communicable diseases in the adolescents and in children. So essentially non-communicable diseases, even if there is a peak in terms of the age group which is mostly affected, it is a disease which becomes prominent across the life cycle of someone. And in our interventions, we need to ensure that we don't leave anyone behind. The STEP survey for 2017 also showed us as a country that high blood pressure in our population account for 19% of the burden of disease, of which 84% are not on treatment at all. I'm sure in this room, if we were to take our blood pressures, all of us, we are going to find people who are hypertensive when they never knew and they are not on treatment.
The Zambia Association of Manufacturers, ZAM, has expressed disappointment with ZESCO's inconsistent management of load shedding schedule. ZAM President Ezekiel Sekele says this is negatively affecting the manufacturing industry. Mr. Sekele has told QTV News that there is need for ZESCO management to ensure they adhere to their own timetable as opposing to switch off power abruptly. He notes that ZESCO has not been following the load shedding schedule of late. Mr. Sekele says there is need for the power utility company to stick to its load shedding schedule to enable the manufacturing industry to plan their business activities. He further encouraged ZESCO management to communicate to its customers with whenever need arises to change the load shedding schedule.
However, whereby they know that that plan where it is indicated that it's 17 or whatever time that the load shedding will kick in, and if there are any changes for whatever reasons, it's very important that communication is done. And that's why we've been discussing with our colleagues at ZESCO through the Director for Commercial and Customer Services, Mr. Chiti Mataka, to enhance communication. And I'm happy to note on behalf of the Zambia Association of Manufacturers that ZESCO, through the Directorate of Commercial and Customer Services, has tried under very challenging circumstances, under a challenging environment, to be close to the manufacturing sector. We have set up communication lines for our Copper Belt colleagues in Kitwe, Ndola, Lusaka as well, where we've been meeting in closed door meetings with ZESCO on a continuous basis to discuss the challenges that we've been facing. Yes, we know about the challenges of water, but there's nothing that we can or do. No one is going to manufacture water. However, it's the need to communicate, because we all need to manage the load shedding plans. If we cannot manage the load shedding plans, then we are all finished. However,
Government has been urged to consider completely doing away with unproductive programs such as the social cash transfer. Patriots for Economic Progress (PEP) leader Sean Tembo says programs such as the social cash transfer only encourages laziness among citizens. Mr. Tembo says government should instead use the money it is spending on such programs to invest in sustainable institutions such as the Citizens Economic Empowerment Commission (CEEC). Mr. Tembo has told QTV News that this is what will enable citizens to access loans for investing in productive revenue-earning ventures at affordable rates. Former Minister of Communications and Transport, William Harrington, has questioned the deal signed between Zambia and Democratic Republic of Congo for the export of 600,000 metric tons of maize and meal. Mr. Harrington has wondered how government can predict the harvest for 2019-2020 farming season and commit the country to the deal. He has reminded government that Zambia is currently facing a food crisis, which has left many Zambians hungry due to the drought the country experienced in the 2018-2019 farming season. Mr. Harrington has therefore called for transparency with regards the Zambia-DRC deal to avoid what happened with a similar deal with Malawi.
I know the Minister of Agriculture says it will come out of the 2020 harvest, but I do not see how government can project that the next harvest will be so good that we can commit Zambia to a deal to export so many thousand metric tons of maize to a neighboring country, when right now Zambia is undergoing, according to press reports, a food crisis. Maybe there are maize stocks in the country available, but the question is, why is then there so much complaints of hunger from the general population in various parts of the country? So I think we need to see more transparency over the Zambia-Congo DR deal, so that we can be assured that firstly, the interest of the Zambian consumer is catered for before committing Zambia to such an ambitious export project.
The Zambia Congress of Trade Unions, the ZCTU, has observed the need for Zambia to invest in skills development for the country to achieve economic growth and address social challenges of poverty and inequality. The ZCTU Secretary General Cosmas Mkuka has proposed that government should consider opening a fund to help those that have done skills training to form cooperatives. Mr. Mkuka notes that investing in skills development can be very beneficial for the country, looking at how much infrastructure development is going on in the country, which requires locals to take a center stage. He says investing in skills development will also help youths and the public to depend less on white-collar jobs.
Because even those people who have done the skills, we are not supporting them. In certain areas, I mean, the idea of skills development, like if those who have done carpentry, bricklaying, when they finish, we should even be keeping a fund for them to form cooperatives so that we are able to do business with them through cooperatives. Now, what is happening, because it's not beneficial, people stop doing certain skills training to go and do commercial and other subjects like accounts, which are just white collar. But when it comes to the skills, like carpentry, joinery, the bricklaying, plumbing, and so on, we have ignored that. But I think that's the way to go, because Zambia is investing in construction. We can do a lot of courses in skills development. But I think that's one area where we need to invest a lot. Because
the Zambia Federation of Disability Organizations, ZAFOD, has urged the Electoral Commission of Zambia, ECZ, and political parties to consider persons with disabilities during the 2021 elections. Speaking to QTV News, ZAFOD Acting Director Albert Mutale says the social and economic environment during elections should also recognize people with disabilities. Mr. Mutale adds that political parties should also adopt persons with disabilities to contest in the 2021 elections. He notes that during the 2016 elections, a number of persons with disability participated in voting, but that there is need for the ECZ to ensure that a lot more is done in the 2021 elections.
And the human rights approach is looking at disability issues as disability resulting from the interaction with the barriers in the society, and these barriers are the ones that create disability. So we are looking at removing these barriers that restrict or limit a person with disability from participating in the political and public life. So as ZAFOD, we are looking at, as we are coming to the 2021 general election, we are looking at how persons with disability will participate in the political and public life. Now, when we talk about participating in the political and public life, we are basically looking at taking part in the management of the affairs of our country. How are persons with disability going to take part? So in short, we are saying let the person with disability take part in the management of the public affairs of our country through directly, like standing for office as president, standing for offices as parliament, members of parliament, standing for offices as councillors in local government council elections. They have to stand, they have the right to stand.
We now turn to sport. Ministry of Defense Permanent Secretary Stewart Mwale has urged the team which will represent the Zambia Defense Forces at the 7th International Military Sports Council CISM Games in China to do their very best in various sports disciplines they will compete in. Addressing the sportsmen and women at the Ministry of Defense, Mr. Mwale has encouraged the team to speak positively about Zambia's tourism potential to other participants for the growth of the industry. Mwale says the participation of the Defense Forces in the World Military Games is meant to enhance the friendship that Zambia and China have enjoyed for a long time. The Permanent Secretary has also cautioned the team to exhibit the highest level of discipline that will portray the good image of the military and Zambia as a whole. And the Ministry of Defense CISM Director Brigadier General Oscar Nyoni says the team is comprised of 19 participants drawn from the Zambia Army, Zambia Air Force and Zambia National Service. Meanwhile, the head of delegation for the Zambia, Colonel Frederick Muchanailo, has expressed confidence that the team will fly the Zambian flag high. This year's World Military Games will take place in Wuhan, China, from the 18th to the 28th of October 2019.
The participation of the Zambia Defense Force in such an important event does not come as a surprise. The government decided that the Defense Force participates in these World Military Games to enhance the friendship. Therefore, as a team, you are ambassadors of both the Zambia Defense Force and the country as a whole. Whilst in China, you'll be expected to exhibit the highest level of discipline that will portray the good image of our military and Zambia as a country. I wish to encourage you to also talk about the country's tourism potential to the other sports participants in your free time.
Zambia Defense Force is participating in the World Military Games for the 7th time. They've participated in these games since their inception. And so we are going as a delegation of 19 for these ones, which will take place in Wuhan, China.
And the team was adequately prepared. And we hope to bring the best results because we are representing Zambia. And hence, we have to carry the flag of Zambia higher and higher.
That sporting item brings us to the end of the news. But before we go, here is a recap of stories making headlines. Finance Minister Walyanga Ndu says government owes a total of 4.7 billion kwacha in VAT refunds as at 30th June. President Edgar Lungu has urged ministers to pull up their socks and explain the negative effects of climate change and what government is doing to mitigate it. And Lusaka lawyer Kelvin Walyafube has challenged the church to show leadership and rebuke those he says are leading to the country's downfall. That will do it for the news. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye, and continue watching QTV.